These are my top 15 discontinued eyeshadow palettes. Welcome to everyone watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Welcome to Eyeshadow Palette Month, which is still going on. And today I thought I could share with you my top 15 favorite eyeshadow palettes that you can no longer buy. I do have to say that I didn't even go into my makeup memory box for these. In fact, a lot of my favorite palettes have been discontinued, so this was actually easier to put together than my top 15 palettes that you can still buy, which I'll be posting for you tomorrow. So stay tuned for all of that goodness. And then today we're going to be chatting about lots of discontinued makeup. So I hope you don't mind, but maybe you still have these lying about yourself, and this is a reminder for you to go back to it and to use it again in your own collection. Or maybe this is a reminder where you're like, oh, I wish I would have gotten that palette as well. So let me go through these. Some of these are a right old trip down memory lane. I could have featured so many more if I would have included my makeup memory box, but I did a video all about that in 2 parts. So I'll make sure to link those videos down below. And in case you want to enter the giveaway and share your top 10 favorite eyeshadow palettes with me, I'll make sure to link that video down below as well so that you know how you can enter and what you can win. We're going to start things off with a big guy because this is the biggest thing I have here and I just need to get it out of the way. This is the Blend Bunny Surge palette. This is also one of the first ever Blend Bunny eyeshadow palettes I personally tried, and I still like it till this day. It's one of the best, more colorful, rainbow-esque kind of color stories in my makeup collection, and the reason for it being the fact that it has pastels to a neon, but also the really deep shades. It's got a great row of shimmers, some good midtones, and all of these shades really nicely go together, which is of course the entire thing that Blend Bunny is known for doing. This is of course the older eyeshadow palettes, eyeshadow formula that Blend Bunny has to. This is of course the older eyeshadow formula that Blend Bunny used to do. They no longer do this kind of formula, and they had to discontinue this palette, I believe, because it was very difficult to source these neon pigments. So I'm really, really happy that I got my hands on this. It's one of the very few more like rainbow-leaning color stories I still have. I'm not a huge fan of rainbow color stories for myself because I feel they're very limiting. Not because I don't like looking at them, but this is just beautiful. Such a well-made palette, such a well-done palette. Loads of variety, loads of different shades in here, loads of different looks you can do with this. And therefore it's one of my favorite more colorful eyeshadow palettes till this day. And Blend Bunny does such a good job, and I wish they would come back with something similar to this. They haven't since. Like I said, they can't copy it exactly, but they've done other renditions of older palettes, like the blends has been revamped. So part of me is like, will they ever do like a revamped Surge palette? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe we'll get that at some point. It would be nice. And this is such a classic, and it made me really, really sad when I noticed that the Rose Quartz by Huda Beauty was no longer being sold and widely available. There were a couple of units still left on the official website. It seemed to be one of those occasions where the brand just keeps selling whatever stock is left through their official website, and then when it's gone, it's gone. So you may still be able to find one of these floating around the interweb in your country or anything like that. But this is no longer being sold at other retailers that stock the brand, or that makes it just a lot easier to shop for loads of people. It did come back for like a short period of time, but it hasn't really come back in honest. So that's why I am including it in this video. And this for a very long time was always in my top 10 favorite eyeshadow palettes ever made. It's such a good, like, rosy, like, it's sort of more like a neutral palette with a twist for me, where you get mainly neutrals and then you just have a couple of these pinky purpley tones in. That's what makes the palette. I'm not a huge fan of the warm tones in here. I mainly, like, you can see which shades I reach for mostly, and it's especially the shimmer here that has a nice big dent in. I sometimes mix it with the pinks, but very often I just keep it very neutral and go for these like mauvey, taupey things that it has to offer. Those are the things I reach for the most. This is a wonderful eyeshadow palette. I really enjoy the Huda Beauty larger eyeshadow palette formula, but I did also declutter some of my Huda Beauty over time because it just wasn't quite it. However, this one, if I'm ever going to get sick of it, or if it expires on me, it will probably have to go into my makeup memory box. That's usually what happens if I'm no longer interested in using the product, or if it is no longer good enough to use it and I have very, very strong memories attached to it, then it goes into the makeup memory box, and this is definitely a contender for that. Let's take another trip down memory lane. An eyeshadow palette I tend to use every fall because it goes so well with a lot of my more jewel-toned multi-chromes is the ABH Subculture. Now, this was only around for a hot minute, and if you were around the online beauty community at the time, you know that this caused a lot of controversy. I feel I got a good one, so for me it's always been a favorite. And this was like the first time in my life that I really found this like kind of color story. I was never a huge fan of any of the shimmers in here, and the palette kind of stops there for me. If I use this palette, like again, you can see what I'm using most. I'm using Mercury, I'm using this green tone, and I have a tendency to use the two deepest shades. Axis, which is this teal, is one of the best teals ever made in my opinion. So I love that. But if I want to set up the look, I do tend to go into this orange, for instance, or this like reddish tone as well. Rowdy, the dark purple, is really, really beautiful as a liner or like a shade to deepen things up, but without it being a black, which is what I prefer. This is still, in my book, such a unique color story. Yes, it was copied into the high heavens by the time this launched, especially because there were so many people who had lots of notes on this one. But for me, it's always been a really good palette, and it served me really, really well. So again, one of those palettes where I feel like this is definitely a contender for the makeup memory box if it ever comes to that. I don't buy a lot of backups of makeup because I know how long it can take for makeup to be used up, but I know because Catrice is so prone to discontinuing products all the time that if I wanted to keep this eyeshadow palette in my life, I would need a backup of it. So this is the only eyeshadow palette backup I have in my entire makeup collection, and sadly they did discontinue it. This is the 5-in-a-box modern smoky look eyeshadow palette by Catrice. It comes with this beautiful like taupey shade, and then this blue tone, and this like deeper bluish gray, and then some like neutrals to sort of round out the palette. I love this shimmer. This has been a favorite for such a long time. I don't reach for it a whole lot, but these really nice 5-pans from Catrice were so great for travel. So that's what I was using it a lot for when these were still around and readily available. I don't tend to do a lot of makeup when I travel though, so that's why I'm like, do I want to take an entire palette, or do I just take a single, so that I have the option to do a little bit of makeup if I feel so inclined. But very often I just like, especially on my recent trip to Scotland, like it was raining most days and I was going to be out hiking, so there was no use for me to have a full face of makeup on. It would just be in the way. So yeah, that's why I no longer travel with these, but I still love this palette till this day so much. There's a reason why I decided to buy a second one of this, because I knew I didn't want to be without this. Now this one made me very, very sad to see it go, but Glossier seems to have discontinued a lot of their colorful makeup products. They still do makeup, but I feel when I was last in the Glossier store, what was still around was their skincare and their fragrance. That's what they seem to be focusing on mostly now. But the makeup is, it's still on their website, but even like something like this, a lot of the makeup products from Glossier that I've tried and that I've loved over the years are no longer for sale. So I'm not exactly sure what they're doing, but they seem to be revamping it completely, or perhaps doing away with a lot of it. And they have discontinued their entire range of these trio eyeshadow palettes. This is in the shade Jute. It's one of their monochromes, and this is really, really pretty. I also have the one in Mist. These I don't feel as emotionally attached to as the Rose Quartz and the Subculture. So if these were to ever go bad, or if like they are no longer something that I want to reach for, these are probably going to end up on a declutter pile at some point in time. I'm pretty sure about that, even though I did buy these while I was in London. So I do have that memory attached to it, but it hasn't been like such a big part of my core makeup needs like the Subculture and the Rose Quartz have been. That I feel like I need to keep these around at all costs. It doesn't really matter all that much, I feel. But Jute is really pretty. It's that really nice basic sort of eyeshadow look. You just get 3 shades that are essentially the same shade, but you get it in a matte, in a satin, and in a metallic. I like the concept of these a lot. It's just Glossier as a brand I think is going in a different direction, and it's not the direction that I want to go in with my makeup. Another one that was limited edition, and I knew buying it would be limited edition, is this Dior Backstage eyeshadow palette. They also do palettes in their regular range, but Silver Essentials was limited edition for Christmas one year, and it never came back. I remember spotting this at a Sephora on one of my travels, and it instantly grabbed me. It was something I had seen online on Instagram, and I had talked about it in my new makeup releases, and I wasn't sure whether I was gonna like it until I saw it in real life, and I was able to swatch it, and I was like, oh, this is what I want. It is a different formula, though, compared to some of the indie brands that I'm about to show you as well. This is just less intense makeup. It's more satiny. The formula in here is a little bit thinner. It's more buildable, but that's what I like as well. For some, like, not everybody needs or wants to use these really intense, super pigmented eyeshadows. If that's you, maybe don't go for the Dior Backstage line, but I really appreciate this, and it essentially has 3 grays. It's got some purpley rosy tones, and then some like neutrally things to round it out. It's really, really pretty. It just feels very sophisticated when you use this, which is why I'm still really happy I own mine, so it's still a favorite, but sadly not something you can go out and buy. A brand that did away with most of their eyeshadow palettes in this format is Zoeva, so I know you can no longer buy this. However, Zoeva is still a brand. You can still find them, but I think they are mainly available online, unless you are in Germany. I have heard people say in my comments when I asked in a recent video that you can still buy some Zoeva from Douglas. If you're ever in Germany, or if you are in Germany, then that could be an opportunity for you to try the brand. Zoeva is a very, very solid, well-rounded makeup brand. It's just one of those brands that doesn't get talked about as much anymore. I still have a bunch of their eyeshadow palettes from back in the day when they did these 10 pans, and the Melody is my favorite. If I had to pick a favorite Zoeva eyeshadow palette, it would be this one. It's got a couple of like duochromes in, and remember, these eyeshadow palettes were released mainly between like 2014 and 2018, back when duochromes and multichromes weren't a staple yet in every single eyeshadow palette we got. So for Zoeva, a brand that is so underrated, to do something that good, and the Melody is my favorite because it has these really beautiful neutrals in, but you're getting a couple of pops of color. You have those peachy tones that are really pretty. Everything in here has a little bit of a shift, but it's not like boom kapow in your face. Like today I'm wearing like a purpley multi-chrome, duochrome sort of situation. I love it. It's really pretty, but you don't need that every single day if you don't want to. And the Melody gives it to you in a very subtle, sophisticated way. This color story works really well for me. It's so good for my fair skin tone without it being overpowering or too smoky. Like with a lot of eyeshadow palettes, especially before trying this around this time, were always a little bit deeper than what I expected to get from seeing some of the shades in the palette. And this one was one of the very first palettes where I was like, I can really use every single shade in the palette and be happy with the way the look turned out. And this one, I think, is still an excellent palette. I reached for all of my Zoeva eyeshadow palettes again in a palettes I want to go back to video. I think in June it was all Zoeva palettes, and I had a great time using this again. It still hasn't expired for some reason. Now I have to put this one here because I forgot to mention it in my Rosy Tone palette video that you saw the other day, but the She's and Parties by Melt. This is very discontinued, and it's very sad that they did that. I used to own this as a stack originally. I had the original like Melt stack when this was only 4 shades, and I loved it because when they did this as a palette, they included some lighter tones that made it a lot more usable for me. So these like lighter lavender shades were in the original palette. And some of the things that have a slightly more like cool tone vibe are the things that make this palette work for me so well. It's such a good all-rounder mauve toned eyeshadow palette, but you can no longer buy it. Which is, I think, why it sort of slipped my brain to include it in the other video, and I already had like 15 palettes to show you in that video, and I was like, I'll leave this one out. But yes, I know I forgot to put it in there, but it's still a favorite till this day. Now, I'm not sure whether this is coming back or not, but this came out, I think, about a year ago, And then it was around, and then it was discontinued, and I believe for the fall time, the Bonfire from Glaminatrix is coming back. But with Glaminatrix, I'm never sure what is and isn't in stock. They seem to release a palette, have it around for 2 to 3 months, then they release something new, and whatever stock is still left is being sold, but once the stock is gone, the palette is gone. That's how they seem to be operating. I just feel Glaminatrix is not the kind of brand that keeps their products around for a very long time, which makes them a little bit harder to get, which is why I put the Bonfire in here, because when I used this last year, I was blown away. This was sent to me in PR by Monolith. It wasn't my pick. When I spotted this, I was like, not sure I need this in my life, but then I fell head over heels in love with it. It has a very cool tone quad, this very fiery orangey red quad, and then this green quad. The green quad is my favorite. That one just is everything to me. It's such a beautiful one, but the unexpected highlight of the palette were the oranges and the reds for me. It's why I've actually decided, like at the end of last year, we got quite a few palettes with reds in them, and this palette made me want to try more red eyeshadow to see and challenge myself a little bit more to see if I can make it work, and I can make it work. So this is great, and this became an unexpected favorite last year. I really hadn't clocked it as something I would love, but it did, and it really, really rose to the top of my list last year, so I have to feature it here. I love these tones. I'm not very inclined combining these though. You could very easily, you combine the greens with the oranges or the neutrals with the greens or whatever configuration you can come up with. But this is just so satisfactory when you use it as a quad. And the formula in this is amazing. So the Bonfire by Glaminatrix could be something you can still find, could not be something you can still find, but I love this palette to pieces and I think it's really good. Something that I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that Glossgods is going to bring it back is the Smoke and Mirrors palette. Now Glossgods has announced that they are one of the brands that need some time to figure out how they're going to do European shipping now that the EU regulations have changed. This is something that's an issue for a lot of like smaller brands. I believe Monolith is shipping as usual, so I'm not sure how they are figuring it out. Monolith did also share on their Instagram stories a link where you can leave feedback to the European Union to like tell them like, hey, this is hurting smaller businesses and what are you going on about? So know that Glossgods may be very difficult to get for the foreseeable future. They have only said, though, that they're not stopping it completely to be shipping to Europe. They just need some time to figure out how this is going to affect them, and maybe they will have a couple of countries they still ship to or not. Most brands will have updated their shipping policy now. Some brands still ship to places like France and Germany, but then they don't ship to the Netherlands, for instance. So with Glossgods, that is currently the case, I believe. So just so you know, but the Smoke and Mirrors is one that I picked up when I hadn't even tried the brand. The Glossgods had just gotten on my radar. The new Neutrals Remixed and the Dancing in the Rain palette had just made its way to me. I hadn't tested these things out, but I had swatched them and was very impressed with the swatches. So when they did this as a limited edition that Christmas, I just bought it blindly, pretty much. And I fell in love hard. There is, however, a different cool tone color story that Glossgods now does that I feel is a little easier to get. This was literally out for like 2 to 3 months, and then it was gone, and it was never brought back. Why? This is still, till this day, one of my favorite cool tone color stories on the planet. You have these really, really nice gray tones, these like pinky purpley tones, and then you have a really beautiful, very light row with these shifty shimmers as well. Such a beautiful palette. I wish they brought this back, and that when they do, they can ship to a lot of different locations again. Another discontinued brand then, Misha Lou Cosmetics. This brand was around for a hot minute. They did a couple of palettes, and then they were gone. And I understand why, because I did hear people say that they placed orders and things never came, or they had really bad experiences with the customer service. The website also looked a little bit shady because there were a lot of typos and language errors on the website, which I think also discourage people from shopping through the brand. So that could actually, like, there were just so many factors that weren't helping this brand at all. Then I think there was also some backlash by the time, like, they were sending things out in PR and stuff. It was a whole mess. But the Misha Lou Witchcraft palette is one that I still really think of as the ultimate grungy color story. I mean, it doesn't get more grungy than this. We have these really nice, warm, spicy brown tones. Then we have these oranges, these greens, that are these really nicely deep, dark, saturated things. And then we have a pop of purple just thrown in the mix. This shade here, I think it's called Magic, yes, is this really pretty duochrome sort of shade. And these eyeshadow palettes have held up so well in my makeup collection. I also own the Fawn palette, which is a really, really beautiful neutral. The shimmers in here were amazeballs. I still really enjoy this eyeshadow palette for sure, but it's very much discontinued. I don't think this brand is even around anymore. And then I think for some people, this is the palette that got away, this limited edition palette from Catrice. This is the Fall in Colors eyeshadow palette, and this is absolutely stunning. I actually was able to track down a couple of these through Amazon when it launched more widely in Europe, and then I was able to put it in a giveaway because this was limited edition in a fall collection. The Catrice limited edition collections are only out for about 6 weeks, and then the products are pulled again. So it's very difficult sometimes, especially if the products are very popular, to get your hands on it. But this was like still hanging around my local drugstore. Like, I picked this up in store from my local drugstore. I live in an area where I don't think lots of people are buying makeup, so sometimes I'm a little bit lucky getting things, you could say. But this is so beautiful. I go back to this every year. It's essentially like, it looks like a Huda Beauty eyeshadow palette because it has the same quality as a larger Huda Beauty eyeshadow palette, but this was 50 euros at the drugstore. And I mean, this color story, the rosy tones, these spicy warm things, and then these neutrally tones with a nice deep purple that's the deepest shade. So beautiful. Chef's kiss. There are a couple of grayish taupey leaning shades in here as well that I really appreciate. I don't tend to reach a lot for these like spicy things, but the rest of this palette is absolutely gorgeous. This is such a beautiful palette, but I don't think they released it around the globe. I remember when I bought it, it was like October, whatever year it was, and then a year later it was released in places like Romania and stuff. So I don't know what's going on there. Catrice can be very behind. It's the same thing with their releases around the world. So then I'm already showing you things, and then people get frustrated because they're like, I can't get this yet. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And I also have no way of telling you when things will come your way. It's very, very annoying. This one, I don't think you can still get the Glamlite Ghostface Lips. I think the second Ghostface palette they did, you can still buy. But this one in particular, no, you can't. This is just the ultimate gray color story. If you love a gray and you like different undertones of gray, then this was an excellent palette, and I like it a lot for that reason. It's got like purpley tones, it's got things that look a little bit green, we've got things that are like a straight up gray, and then we also have things that have more of a blue undertone. We even get a good taupe in here, like you can see my favorite, this is my favorite shade in the palette. Can you tell? Can you tell? But yeah, Ghostface Lives, such a good cool tone color story. It seems to be the cool tones that get discontinued the quickest, I feel. Am I just the only one? I don't know. Maybe you feel differently. Then Glam Shop, this is a Polish indie brand, and I really adore their palettes. However, their palettes are always limited edition and while stocks last. So whenever you see something on the Glam Shop website and you don't buy it straight away and it's sold out, you know for certain that it's never coming back, which is a bit of a shame because I love my Tsimna Mocha and I love my Coco Sanka, but there's no way you can still buy this. Now, luckily for everybody else, if you look at the Glam Shop website, you will see that they actually have quite a few palettes that look similarly over time. Like, they've released things that are very similar to this vibe that the Tsimna Mocha gives, as a lot of their other things are. So you really don't have to be too sad for missing out on this. I don't know. I haven't seen anything from Glam Shop about their status concerning like shipping around Europe. I do know that for some people it can be weirdly expensive for some reason. I've never paid more than like 8, maybe 9 euros for shipping on there, which I think is pretty reasonable for it coming from Poland. But yeah, they just do some really wonderful things, and this very light, cool tone color story is one of my favorites for a reason. And then here, this is the final palette I want to share with you. This is the Tribe palette from Juvia's Place. Beautiful color story. I use it again in July. And this like warm, spicy thing with the green tones and this very nice bright neon yellowy green. Such a good thing. I don't think a single brand has done anything like it since. But this was weirdly discontinued, like at the height of its popularity, I would say. So again, I believe like with the surge with Blend Bunny at the start of the video, I think they could no longer source these colors or these exact pigments, which is why they had to discontinue it. And I have to be very sad to say that when now I've used all of my Juvia's Place palettes again, I'm starting to feel that they're starting to turn and they are about to expire. So maybe next year, like when I do another round of declutters in March, I may have to declutter this. I'm gonna have to give them a feel then, but they felt quite like thicker in formula, especially the shimmers felt a lot thicker than I'm used to with my Juvia's Place eyeshadow palette. So I don't know if that's the case. They still smell and look okay. They still feel okay in a finger swatch. It was really when I was trying to use it with brushes that the shimmers felt like they had almost like coagulated in some way. So I think this is one that has to go at some point. But yeah, this is such a good palette, and I don't think anybody's done anything like this. So if you still have this lying about, give it a whirl because she's good and she may be expiring on you as well. Those were the eyeshadow palettes I wanted to feature here today. So these were the 15 eyeshadow palettes you can no longer get. Stay tuned for tomorrow because then I will be sharing you my top 15 favorites with palettes you can still buy. So hope you like to stay tuned for that, and then hope to see you in my next video. Bye!